Weird name, but I gulped for a totally different reason. I turned to the Cato family by the gate. He's related to you. The address he'd just given was the empty house where Serica's parents had lived, but the Catos didn't answer. They just stared in horror at the remains of the house they'd just built a few years earlier. I looked back at Tsukumojuku. Your name written 910 910 9den? Ah, Fuku dialect. Yes, it is. So you made quite the bizarre entrance. What do you remember? Well, I was on a boat, crossing the Atlantic from the Canary Islands to the America. The Canary Islands? Never heard of them? Small island owned by Spain off the west coast of Africa. Okay. And the Atlantic? The Atlantic Ocean lies between the North and South American continent on the one side, and the Europe and African continents on the other, doesn't it? No. Also, what are you talking about, American and African continents? What continents do you have? Panlandia. This doesn't sound like an issue of education, he said. I nodded. I'm very well educated, I said. He gave me a dubious look, so I added, I'm a detective, after all. His eyes opened wide, then he grinned. Oh, so am I. Oh yeah? You're shitting me. The great detective Kato Tsukumojuku? Never heard of you, and it sounds like that ain't 'cause you operated abroad. Right. Better introduce myself then. My name's Jorge Joestar. Everyone calls me Jojo. Detective Jojo. Welcome to the new world, where the Atlantic and the Canary Islands don't exist. Tsukumojuku just gaped at me for a while. What is beyond playing at? He asked at last. What role does it have in mind for me? This made no sense, but it seemed like he was talking to himself, so I let it pass. No idea where he came from, but it was a place with weird-ass tornadoes. Didn't seem like somewhere you could just up and go as you pleased. What he just said was probably some sort of religious grumbling. Nothing I could do about it. The way he'd appeared was so bizarre I wasn't really all that surprised by anything anymore, but by the time he was through getting checked out at the hospital, Tsukumojuku had gone straight through surprise to clutching his head. Firstly, while it was indeed July 23rd, it was 2012, not 1904. He travelled forwards in time over 100 years. We quickly proceeded to comparing world maps. Of course, there were no world maps that looked the way Tsukumojuku described his world, so he had to draw his freehand. He produced a very detailed sketch of a very strange world. His world looked broken. I showed him ours, and he said, "This is impossible." My sentiments exactly. When Tsukumojuku said nothing more, I said, "There's no way the land shifted this much in 100 years. Continental drift was a matter of a few millimeters a year, and that was on the active side. It would take hundreds of millions of years for Tsukumojuku's world to become mine. The continents moved on the plates, forming a giant continent, breaking up and moving together again. Plate tectonics showed this had happened and would happen again. Even if his continents had just merged together once to form my world, this would have taken forever. But I didn't see this change happening so easily. The pieces were all mixed up. To get this far, they'd have to trial and error it for billions of years, longer than the life of the Earth. It had been roughly 100 million years since the first humans showed up, so if Tsukumojuku came from the same planet as me, he would have had to have been through several continental divides. But if he came from a billion years ago, his clothes, manners, and Japanese were much too similar to ours. I couldn't see much more than 100 years difference between us. I was pretty sure the only possible explanation would involve parallel world theory. That sounded fun. This proved parallel worlds not only existed, but that it was possible to travel between them. Ha ha! While I worked myself into a tizzy, Tsukumojuku sat on the hospital bed, comparing the two maps closely, muttering surprise at the location of one place or another, confused about the location of others. I say, he said at last, I don't see England anywhere. English is a phantom country, not on any map, I said, the stock self-deprecating description all English citizens used. A group of Anglo-Saxons living in Maine in the 19th century had declared independence, calling themselves the Kingdom of England. They even fought a war. The American government never officially recognised them, but several other countries did, only for them to collapse from within and be swiftly swallowed back up into the United States. Having lost their country, the English scattered across the world. There are many families like the Joestars that would have died out if they hadn't adopted. Oh, Tsukumojuku said gravely. Well, at any rate, I have a theory as to how I came to this world. You're some detective, I said. I was used to hearing this, but I'd never said it myself before. I was a little miffed, honestly, but I didn't have enough data to form a theory of my own yet. It's just a theory. I've no proof of any kind, he said, and pointed down at the map he'd drawn. I was headed here, towards the southern tip of Florida. If you connect Florida, this island, Puerto Rico, and then this island, the Bermudas, you get a triangle-shaped area of ocean. Legend has it that many ships vanish entirely as they pass through this area. Sometimes just the passengers vanish, and the ships around found empty. We call it the Bermuda Triangle. Like I said, just before I passed out, I was gazing at the coast of Florida on deck, then went down to my cabin to stow my luggage. The boat was headed due north, right through this point on the triangle. Now, this area of Florida is located at 25 degrees north, 81 degrees west, which is exactly where Japan is in this world. Ooh, I thought, and took a closer look at the maps myself. Even on the hand-drawn map, it was clear the 2 points overlapped. Then I noticed something, and said excitedly, and if that theory is true, then we've basically figured out how to get you back. Since Tsukumojuku still didn't quite know his way around the world, I pointed. This is a big gulf in the centre of Panlandia, with a peninsula and a bunch of islands. That's Florida, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda all right on top of each other, right? The Bermuda Triangle is basically the Bermuda Dot. And according to your map, this is right on top of your world's Nishi Akatsuki. Really? Ha! This is straight up telling you where to go to get back home, isn't it? Yeah, but it's kind of scary, isn't it? Like someone made this happen. Like they summoned me. I agreed. Like nothing, someone clearly did. Sure, that's scary, but I got your back on this. I'm hella interested in what's happening to you. Fucking use hella. But I'm not the target here, Tsukumojuku said pointedly. You are. Eh? What? I'm more like an innocent bystander who just got mixed up in this mess. But you aren't. Why were you there tonight? How did you find me? Good point. I explained how I'd solved 15 locked room murders 2 years ago, had found the 15 puzzle that had eluded me at the time, solved it, then took off down Route 365 to verify the answer. I had to admit, he might be right. I was led right to him. Guess neither of us were there, coincidentally. Not only that, you said you solved 15 locked room murders 2 years ago. In my world, I did exactly the same thing. Huh? Did how? In the Canary Islands, on the island of La Palma. I'm sure the details of the cases are different, but the two of us compared notes on the points of each set of 15. They were completely different, of course. The same tricks could not be used in a different country and time, but the order of discovery in Tsukumojuku's cases was identical, and the 15 puzzle they formed matched as well. I never noticed, Tsukumojuku said gloomily. I just noticed myself like an hour ago. Bet you would have figured her out soon enough. He looked up at me. You ever worked a case with another detective? Nope. Only like 800,000 people even live in Fuku. Lot of cases for the country, and I ain't the only detective around, but I never bumped into any of the others on a case. If we hear someone else is on the job, the others all stay away, I suppose. I have heard it happens to Tokyo or Osaka detectives all the time, though. I've never even met another detective. The Canary Islands were not much more populated. So let me ask you this. If several detectives are on the case, and one solves the case before the other does, is the slower one still a detective? Ugh. Who gave a crap? Just because I solved the 15 puzzle first didn't mean he had to sulk about it. His case was 100 years ago, maybe, so he weren't exactly racing here. Depends on the next case, I said at last. If the slower detective gets there first the first time they team up, they're even. Honestly, I was just trying to make him feel better. He wasn't buying it at all. Detective isn't a title earned over a lifetime. You don't look back over your deeds and realise you're a detective. You know you are, and introduce yourself as such. True enough, if you can't solve a case, you aren't a detective. Certainly, in that moment, other people might say you weren't qualified. Detective, in the sense we use it, is an honorary term. The moment people deny it, you lose the right to it. and you can get it back on the next case. You're thinking in lifetime terms again. You can't be a detective your whole life. You're one on each individual case. Fuck this. Okay, so you feel like you aren't a detective anymore? Do better next time. I haven't believed I was a detective for some time. Even on the Canary Islands, I wasn't sure why I could continue to act like a detective in spite of it. It never felt real. I don't know what you're driving at, but if you solved cases, you're a detective. I might have got to the 15 puzzle before you, but you solved all 15 cases, right? You did your job. If someone got to the truth before you, would you still call yourself a detective? I might keep a lid on it till the next time, yeah. There will be no next time, Tsukumojuku said. I'll never call myself a detective again. Not now I've met you. You are the Jorge Joestar who will steal my title. What the fuck are you talking about? I finally slipped and swore in front of him, but he didn't seem to mind. He even laughed. Been a long time since a Jorge Joestar spoke like that to me. What? Are your memories getting confused, or my memories and mine are clear, Jorge Joestar? I can safely say my mind and headspace had never been so free of clutter. My role as detective may have ended, but I believe I've been given a new one. I'm here to explain beyond to you. I instantly knew I didn't want to hear any of this, but that I needed to hear it all the same. In my world, Tsukumojuku said, there is another Jorge Joestar. What? Really? This was getting fun. He told me about this other Jorge Joestar, the story of a bullied kid who'd made friends with a detective and had adventures on a South Seas island that didn't exist in our world. The 15 locked room murders weren't the only similar cases. The 3 serial killer cases I closed the year before that had also been solved 3 years ago by Tsukumojuku and his partner, Jorge Joestar. Likely they'd caught psychos remarkably similar to the Guru Maijin and the nail peeler last year. Was this synchronicity, or was history repeating itself? Before I could think further, Tsukumojuku said, and this year, George and I captured the true mastermind behind the 15 locked room murders. The man who invented all the locked room tricks and controlled the killers from the shadows. Wait, stop, I yelled. I haven't done that bit yet. Let me think. Tsukumojuku recalled from my sudden ferocity. It's not that complicated, he said. You want to steal the detective role back from me? I don't mean to do that, and I doubt that would happen. I ignored him and began thinking furiously. So there was a mastermind. Obviously that made sense, of course there was. 15 locked room murders had happened all in a row, all in Fuku, all in Reihoku. But like I said before, the police and I had suspected there was a mastermind / controller in the shadows, and left no stone unturned in our search for one. Had we missed something? I didn't think so. I was sure we'd been thorough, and correct. There were no connections of any kind between anyone related to any of the 15 cases. The police and forensics people had been over every detail. We'd even tried hypnosis and every occult technique we could think of to no avail. We even tried voodoo dolls. I had not been wrong. Those 15 locked room murders had ended with the summoning of this other detective from a bizarre alternate universe. I'd been so sure the 15 cases had each been independent, even though they'd led me, coincidentally or otherwise, to what seemed awfully like a magical phenomenon. But perhaps that notion was my mistake. I definitely hadn't overlooked everything. I checked every detail. Even now I felt comfortable removing that option from the table. So if I hadn't overlooked anything, logically, there must be something I hadn't looked at yet. The man who invented all the locked room tricks and controlled the killers from the shadows. If someone like this was behind the cases in my world too, this shadow controller's shadow must have touched each of the 15 killers. But that was impossible. One of the cases had happened inside a prison, and the killer was serving a life sentence with limited visitation rights. And we checked every visitor thoroughly. Another locked room case involved a shut-in son who killed his father. The son hadn't spoken to anyone outside his family, and we'd found no records of any suspicious contact online either. This shadow controller could not physically exist. In other words, he had to exist in some non-physical form. This wasn't that surprising an idea. We'd already entertained a number of occult theories and tested them thoroughly. We'd done occult, so what else was there? Where did they meet? Where could they meet without meeting? Dreams, I said. Or daydreams. I wasn't talking to Tsukumojuku. I was just thinking out loud. I kept going. Not daydreams. That's just thinking. No way for someone else to control you. Unless you had a delusion you were being controlled. But that would still mean they created the locked room trick themselves. So it must be dreams. Were dreams 100% produced by your own mind? At this point I noticed Tsukumojuku watching me. Half surprised, half impressed. From this I knew I must be right. But really? Dreams? It was my idea though. Dreams then. Could this shadow controller have manipulated the killers in their dreams? The killers in my world all met a clown in their dreams called the Locked Room Maestro, Tsukumojuku said. He forced the plans for the murders on them. Since everyone forgets their dreams, they all thought they came up with the tricks themselves. Had he watched Inception or something? But that was sci-fi and a movie, and you couldn't actually jump into someone else's dream. I must have looked sceptical, but Tsukumojuku carried on expositing. This so-called Locked Room Maestro wore clown clothes and makeup, and appeared in the dreams of the killers, working his way into their hearts, and drawing forth the darkest emotions within. That part wasn't so hard. All he had to do was find someone they hated, or had trouble getting along with, or just had trouble communicating with, even just simple disgruntlement. Once he found those emotions, the Locked Room Maestro would appear in their dreams, and blame all those problems on this one person. Nobody can escape their nightmares. The Locked Room Maestro would twist their fear, making it seem like their eventual victim was the source of it all. No matter how forced the reason, logic and sequential progression have no place in dreams. Only the emotional response matters. Once the seed was sown, the killer's fixations would give them even worse dreams. The Maestro would keep a firm grip on the reins, whispering that it was all their victim's fault, and his targets had no choice but to believe him. This vicious cycle continued until they were entirely under his control. The Maestro persisted, driving them deeper, even torturing them if he had to. The killers would find themselves murdered in their dreams, but their eventual victims, or by the Maestro himself. These dreams were so terrifying they'd awaken in a nerve and frenzy, and this persisted until the real world felt like a dream to them. Physically there's nothing wrong with them, but that just makes it worse. They're spending all their time in a state of panic, and don't remember the dreams that caused it, so the frustration is building up inside them with no way to escape, and no clear cause. Eventually, someone they would never have dreamed of killing begins to seem like someone they would murder, and they act. But the Locked Room Maestro never once met them in person. He kept his distance, remained hidden in their dreams. The only reason we ever found the evil clown is because the girl he tried targeting next had a pathological fear of clowns. The Maestro's guise was so terrifying she remembered the dream clearly, spoke to those around her about the horrible clown that kept coming into her dreams and whispering around locked room murders, and this in turn attracted our attention. Nobody she'd spoken to believed the words she'd said, but we did. We spoke with the 15 killers and they all began to remember him. From what they remembered, we were able to piece together his identity. Aside from the red nose and poofy wig, he was just wearing makeup. From their descriptions, we were able to put together a composite sketch. He'd also talked about himself quite a bit in their dreams. He was so sure they wouldn't remember anything. He let slip a number of details that helped us identify him. I suppose after 15 successful remote control murders, all the confidence is unsurprising. He was young too, still in high school, wanted to be a mystery novelist when he grew up. But he had the power to slip into other people's dreams. When we burst into his house, police in tow, we found the clown outfit and makeup. We assume he purchased them to make that part feel real. We found notebooks filled with locked room tricks, but no novels. It seems he didn't have what it took to be a writer. Hell, you can catch the guy, but you can't try him, I said. No way you can prove the ability to enter dreams, and even if he demonstrates it, nobody would remember. There was no trial. The Spanish police on the Palma beat him to death with their nightsticks and sank his body into the sea at night. George and I were powerless to stop them, and his mother didn't even try. If word got around that her son was a witch, and the church got involved, her whole family would be persecuted. Yikes! Country life 100 years ago sounded harsh. If you don't mind me veering off subject, Tsukumojuku started. I stopped him. Hang on, sorry, let me check up on this. See if there are any connections between the dreams of my side's killers. I pulled out my phone, asked Shirai Masami at the Fuku PD, and asked him to interrogate the killers about the dreams, using hypnosis if necessary. Dreams? There you go again with the weird ideas, George, he said, but I knew he'd get it done. I hung up. That's a modern phone? Tsukumojuku said. It's so small, and there's no lines, and there were little pictures moving behind that glass panel. Surprising, certainly, but everything he was experiencing was. We had no time to stop and discuss the culture clash. Look, if we start down that road, it'll never end. America's about to put a man on Mars. I wonder what they'll find on Mars. I wonder what they'll find on Mars.